streaming is on.
Nice.
All right, we're good.
All right. Welcome everybody to the April meeting of the Western North Carolina Linux Users Group. Don't believe we have any scheduled presentation for today, but I think we'll just go around the room and see what people are up to. For the sake of not losing him, let's talk to Dan first.
Okay. Let me turn my phone off because it just interrupted and I couldn't hear a thing you said. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, this month I've been dealing with a lot of health issues, but I was able to do one thing. I think this month. In the month of March, I did a presentation on Open Media Vault and setting up a RAID 1 array with the two spinning 3 terabyte drives that I have in a dual bay enclosure, a Sabrin enclosure, and that was working okay. I was concerned that Open Media Vault warns that you don't want to set up a RAID array in Open Media Vault if you're using a USB connected system because it will fall over most likely. Well, guess what? I moved my system, Open Media Vault, from the 3B Plus Raspberry Pi to the Model 4 because it has more RAM. It has 4 gigs of RAM instead of 1, and it just makes sense to do that. And that worked fine. I mean, I set up Open Media Vault and everything. And when I moved over the system to that particular Raspberry Pi, it fell over. So what I decided to do was to say, okay, forget it. I'm not going to do that because I had to go around the application to set it up in the first place. Once you go around it, then it recognizes your RAID and you can go work with it in the application. Well, that's kind of clunky. I didn't want to do that. And so what I've done instead is I have set up, Gene, what are you doing?
You keep saying fell over. What does that mean?
It means it fell apart, died,
Okay.
fell over. It's a techie term.
All right. Well, I'm not a techie, so.
Okay.
Bits all over the floor.
Yeah. SITB is another one. And then, shat the bed.
No.
But then, or
Okay,
STD.
good enough.
Okay.
Say no more.
So anyway, so what I did was, instead of setting up the RAID again, I still want to be able to access the NAS that I'm creating. But what I did was instead I set up I used Logical Volume Manager, and now I can take advantage of, and it's working great, by the way. I've sent a PDF up on the platform for folks to grab if you want to set this up. It's a DIY project. It shows you exactly how to do it. And so what I did was I researched Logic Volume Management and I set that up. And so now instead of a 3 terabyte NAS, I've got a 6 terabyte NAS. And so what I wanted to do was go out to, I want to share my screen. If you got a moment, I'll share my screen and show you what it looks like in Open Media Vault. So let me see if I can share my screen. And if I remember last time we had problems with sharing the screen on the entire screen for some reason. Window, entire screen. We click it into share. Okay, we should be looking at, everybody see, wait a minute. Everybody see my Open Media Vault?
Yes.
Okay, give me 1 second. You should see this. You see like a spinning drive?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So here's what it is. Here's my Open Media Vault applications at 192.168.1.125 on my network. And let me get into it. Here it is. All right. Everybody see the Open Media Vault screen?
Yep.
Okay. If I go to storage, what I had to do was I had to actually set up a service, but I'm not going to show you that. I set up LVM, which is Logical Volume Management. And if you, real quickly, if you don't know Logical Volume Management, it consists of like 3 parts: physical volume, the volume group, a VG, and then a LV, which is the logical volume. And you have to set up take the 2 physical volumes, which are the 3 terabyte drives, and then you create a volume group from the 2 drives, and then you create a logical volume. So the system sees the entire setup as 1 drive, not 2 drives. And so it looks like here's the physical volume of 2 3 terabyte drives. All right. And then the volume group that was set up, this is the 6 terabyte volume group set up of the 2 drives, dev SDA and dev SDB. And that was the volume group 1 that was set up. And then I created the LV1, which is the logical volume. And so if I go in here and go to the logical volume, you can see the logical volume here of LV1 of 6 terabytes. Okay. So that's the setup basically in a nutshell in Open Media Vault. Now, to prove that it works, proof of content here, I'm going to go to my Thunar file manager and expand it to full screen. You can see what I've done is, in addition to the logical volume management, within Open Media Vault, I use the network file system. I got away from SMB CIFS, the way the Samba basically is what it is. That Microsoft Corporation developed Samba, and that's the server message blocks common internet file system. The problem with that Samba is, and it was developed, by the way, so that Microsoft Windows platforms could communicate with over the network with Linux boxes. And so, but the problem with it is it can be somewhat unstable at times, and it was falling out or stopping working, Gene, from time to time. And so I got away from it and went to a tried and true Unix-based system that Linux adopted, which is the network file system. So I set up network file system, and I created a share called LV1 share, and there it is right there. So if I click on it, you can see here that I've already got things stored in that volume. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and open a new window, and let me minimize this window and minimize this one. And so you've got 2 windows now, and I'm assuming you can still see my window.
Yep.
Okay. And so you've got 2 windows now. This is my, oh, I got them switched. Let me move them around. Give me a second. I like to be, I'm left-handed. So, all right. So here's my Western Digital network attached storage. It's a 4 terabyte RAID 1. And I'm just going to go into, let's say, videos. And let's go down to, let's say, aviation. And here's my favorite guy, Citation Max. And so I'm going to pick a video here, and I'm going to go into my archived documents, which I've got a subset of LV1, which is the NAS share 6 terabyte. And I'm going to go into home directory and videos. And I'm going to take one of these videos here and just pull it down. And you see how fast that is. Okay, so it's copying over that video to my network attached storage, which is the 6 terabyte storage from my 4 terabyte RAID 1 storage. All right, and so it is a pretty large file, so it's going to take a few minutes, a few seconds.
Dan, question.
Yep.
So how many hard drives do you have altogether in this process? You have 3?
No, I've got, and it's doing a comparing checksum right now, which is nice. Thunar does that. No, I have two, Steve. I've got two 3 terabyte spinning 7,200 RPM drives, Western Digital black, and they are sitting in a 2-bay enclosure, and they are set up as 2 physical volumes with a volume group I created, with a logical volume I created from the volume group that is seen by the system as one drive, which is this drive right here,
Okay,
LV1 share.
let me ask you a question.
Mhm.
So when you say you're copying something from a 4 terabyte drive to the logical volume 6 terabyte drive,
Right.
it sounds like there are 3 drives. Two of
Oh,
the
well,
drives are
okay. All right. Well, I'm sorry. The 4 terabyte RAID 1 NAS is a separate NAS altogether. It's a Western Digital
Okay.
NAS running. It's running an operating system called Operating System 5, and that's a separate box altogether. Steve, it's not connected to ModUp. What I've been doing
okay.
with
Got it.
the 2 drive enclosure. And so what I did was, and it's all connected to across the network, of course, and it's using Open Operating System 5 rather. The NAS I created is using network file storage, or network file system rather, NFS. And so I'm able to copy files from the RAID 1 NAS to my newly created NAS, as I'm showing you here, using Thunar as the file manager in Media MX Linux, which is what I'm on the desktop. Understand?
Got it.
Okay. But far as drives go, I've got 4 internal drives to my computer, including my internal hard drive. And then I've got the 2 network attached storage drives outside of the computer, one a RAID 1 and one LVM. So I've got a lot of storage. I've probably got altogether, I would say probably close to 15 terabytes of storage for my whole system, which is far more than I'll ever use. All right. Anybody see that? I'm going to go ahead and unshare. Anybody, any other questions about it? All right. No questions. I'll just go stop sharing. Let me get back to
Dan,
yep.
what flight simulator are you using, and do you like it?
Flight simulator.
Yeah, they're on that. Those files were MP4s of of aircraft landings. And,
Oh no,
and
those are YouTube videos.
oh, okay.
Yeah. Let me get back into the meeting. Here I go.
Right.
Those are YouTube videos. I follow about 4 or 5 aviators on YouTube, and I archive their videos when I can. The ones I like, Premier One Driver and Citation Max and a few others. They're really good aviators. All right, and other than that, that's about all I've been working on as far as Linux goes. Been following Steve's report about the XZ utils. I just posted a Reuters article about it this morning on the platform, and I mean it's a bugaboo. I'm glad the guy caught it, because that could have been a big major problem.
Yeah, I think that's worth a bit of a diversion, because that like the article you sent says, it was definitely a near miss
Oh yeah.
for us. If it hadn't have been caught, and it got, because I mean, every one of my systems has that package. So if it had proceeded to be production code in the various systems that use it, it could have been an absolute nightmare.
Yep.
Which of course for me just means don't be on the bleeding edge. But it's not like, that's not the entire solution, because it does take somebody finding this code
Yeah.
for for it to happen. And yeah, there's a lot of people, a lot of eyes on this code, but there's also a lot of people just using code and trusting it, and not, stuff can stay out there. It probably stayed out there longer than it even should have. So what what does that mean to y'all? How are you doing things differently? What does this give you pause as far as how you operate your open source systems?
Well,
Well,
I'm going to respond to that initially here if I can. It doesn't force me to distrust open source anymore than I do now, which is I trust open source. But I think that what we need to do is I think that developers in the open source community need to take a harder look at who they trust and find ways to mitigate this problem so it doesn't happen again. I mean, they need to find ways to do checks and balances on people who are given a lot of trust in publishing code, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And there needs to be maybe two sets of eyes looking at before a commit goes forward instead of just one set. I know that's double work, but you know, and I'm not a programmer. I mean, I guess I am a programmer, but I'm not a developer, put it that way. So yeah, because I program in Python and PHP. But what do you guys think of that? I mean, that's my take on it. I think we also need to be careful and make sure that our, you know, the XZ utils though is present probably in just about every Linux system out there. And, you know, as long as you keep your security patches up and everything, that's fine. But this thing would have gotten through with all security patches in place because it was somebody who went in and maliciously altered code or injected code rather to do nefarious things, you know, and that's just, I guess, the world we live in today.
yeah, I see this as a question of whether this is basically something being set up for use in cyber warfare
Yeah.
by a nation state, because they said this was something carefully done over a couple of years and not with a ransomware or an obvious monetary goal to begin with, although we can't be sure of that. But
Likely not
you
one
know,
individual either.
yeah, I mean, the fact that one individual is named as the developer doesn't mean that there was actually one person who was that individual. But I noted that Russia and China several years ago, I think, were starting. They had made their own national versions of of Linux, and I'm wondering if they have national repositories so that they could, you know, theoretically, if they wanted to affect the rest of the world that uses the global repositories for major distros, they would not be affected by that. So I'm assuming that the U.S. is doing some, and other nations are also doing the same thing in a sense, and that's very different than looking at you know, either accidental bugs or deliberate malicious stuff or exploits intended to get you money. Um, I don't think, you know, I think it's just another form of if it's another form of warfare or pre-warfare preparation. I think the countries involved will harbor the individuals, like Russia seems to be, and China both seem to be harboring people who've been associated with ransomware. So I don't, you know, it's not like there's a central group that can say these are the rules for development. When it comes to each distro has its own repositories. I think, you know, whether they like Antix uses Debian because it's a fork of Debian, but it also has an Antix repo. So it's very difficult because the system was not devised with security in mind, and to retrofit it to be secure is going to be difficult.
I'm way
But
behind.
lots of eyes. I think that's the main thing. Lots of eyes is the best protection we have at the moment.
I'm way behind on this. Can anybody shoot me a URL that I can look at to see what you're talking about?
Yeah, you're not on the platform, right, Gene? That's
Probably not.
I'm on the art. I put an article up there. This
Oh,
morning.
okay. Well,
I mean, I can shoot you that article if you want me
Yeah,
to.
that'd be great if you could.
Okay.
So I don't want to take the group's time up trying to catch up, but
Gene,
sounds interesting. Yes.
it was also made the New York Times. They had an article said, "Did this one man save the internet?"
Yeah.
It was in the last week. So if you just Google that, you can read it. That's names the guy and lauds him, in spite of the fact that he works for Microsoft.
Yeah. San Franciscan-based Microsoft employee.
Microsoft saves Linux.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Thank you, Microsoft.
Oh my God.
Ah.
We're at the end of this.
Although it's been the other way around for the last few years, hasn't it?
God, there's a lot of friendship between those two realms now for sure. The very short description is there is a library, a package, and I don't know the specific files, but I think it's the XVUtils package, which is a compression, think like gzip or something like that. It's like
Yep.
a gzip alternative
Right.
that's present in pretty much every system. It's in the base system for just about everything, and one of these packages has malware in one of its most recent versions.
Mm.
I didn't read too much on how it got there, but that is basically anyone who's like running complete bleeding edge Debian and taking the updates very aggressively theoretically could have gotten this. Or I think Fedora was the other one mentioned. So, if you're being extremely aggressive on how you get updated, which I'm going to say before I say this, I'm really thinking out loud here. I'm not stating a belief or an opinion, but I do wonder if it's this sort of thing may change the way we see updates, because especially in the Microsoft world, the chant of security is update, patch. And if patching is perhaps not always safe, I mean, you can look at that and say there's commercial software, most notably something we used was SolarWinds. Several years ago, it had a security issue. We weren't actually subject to it, but we got spooked enough that we just immediately stopped using it. Just in case things were worse than it initially appeared. And we went away from it for several years before finally coming back to it after the dust had settled, figuring they've probably learned their lesson and probably have, done more in that realm than most companies do. So maybe they are a better solution than others. Because for one, if it happens again to them, they're probably done as an organization, fool me once, shame on me, that sort of thing. But we focus so much, and I will let you speak, Steve, once I finish this thought. I'm gonna let you finish. I do wonder if we're going to shift the notion away from patch to sort of like more behavior-based detections and sort of frozen, we really do think this particular collection of software is secure for at least what we're using it for. Because one thing you'll end up you'll take patches for everything in the Microsoft world or the Linux world. I do. I mean, I patch all the software, but am I using all that software? Do I truly need to patch things that are on my base system, but none of my production apps use it? So if I'm just running Nginx on a web server as a proxy, it's doing a very small thing. And one thing, of course, is to uninstall the software I'm not using, but that becomes a management headache, because you end up with very dissimilar systems. But should you update things that are never used? I mean, does a vulnerability in a piece of software that is completely outside the role of a server justify updating that package when it will never be used in a way where it becomes vulnerable? So I wonder if it's going to, in some ways, if this happens again and again, change the behavior of organizations, especially when it comes to critical systems of how they operate in this way. Because a lot of my Linux systems, I've I do updates, but my primary security focus is attack surface reduction. Only installing what is, the bare necessities to make the system run and to do the thing it's supposed to do. All right. Sorry, Steve.
No, I was going to speak to the point that I have one of my systems is a SID system, and it's a toy. So I've learned, and I'm running it on a no system D distro, and that means that I'm getting 20, 30, 40 upgrades potentially on a single day, and I have to keep upgrading or deciding whether I want to upgrade something. So I have to go through a process of checking to make sure I'm not moving a particular package from a no system D version, which was customized to avoid system D dependencies, that an upgrade from Debian comes along and it'll just say you want to upgrade this. So I have to check that. So I've learned to put into effect a routine, and that's especially an issue with SID because the upgrades come so many upgrades come, and the reason so many upgrades come daily is because it's an early upgrade, it's a test, and a lot of times the developer finds there are still bugs in it or there are new bugs, and so the next day they come out with another upgrade for the same thing. So in the course of 1 week you may see 2 or even 3 upgrades for the same package. So because it's a no system D fork of Debian, I become, happily paranoid about avoiding problems. And I think that is maybe one thing that people can do when they're doing an upgrade. It's a lot easier with the stable version where you may get 1 or 2 upgrades every 3 or 4 days and nothing in between. Now, this is on an end user system where there's a lot of stuff. If you just installed a full version, because you have a choice of in Antix, you have a choice of a net version, a core version, a base version, or the full version. Each one in order has more packages. Once packages are installed, apt upgrade will tend to display a whole bunch of packages, including things you may never be using. So if you can start with a minimalist system, building up from the net system, and then courageously not add anything, it makes your life easier. But even with that, I've got stuff on the system that this system is not going to use. It's a BIOS based system, not a UEFI system. And yet somehow EFI Boot Manager got onto this system. Well, I'm not bothering to upgrade it because I can't use it. I never use it. So that basically is the message, that this may be a call for the individual user who has a lot of stuff on the system that may come in automatically when they do an install, to basically try to use a tool like Aptitude or Synaptic as a careful check. If they're only going to be looking at 2 or 3 packages being upgraded every 2 or 3 days, it should be fairly easy to check the dependencies and at least that, to see that it's not going to gum up anything. Obviously, that's not going to enable the average end user to say, oh, this software looks like it might have malware in it. They're not going to have the ability to look at the source and understand it. Even if you can look at the source, you have to be able to understand it and be able to thresh through it and say, there's something funny here. And for you, Brent, and this is a question back to you, because I think you're talking in good part also about setting up servers, which in that case, they tend to be more minimalistic. And so there is a little bit of protection there. The downside is, of course, that a server can affect multiple other systems. And that's it.
Yeah, like I said, I do focus on attack surface reduction, but I don't take it to its logical extreme, which I sometimes wonder if I should. So what I do for a Debian system is I install the bare minimum system, which is, not the bare minimum it is needed to run, but it's basically the bare minimum that it offers as an install. And then I install stuff on top of it. And that's been working great. It's not, it doesn't make my life any harder to do it that way. But theoretically, I could look at that system and say, okay, I don't need these packages that you've installed for me. And rip them out as part of my image creation. And the nice thing about working in a server environment, I don't have to do this again and again, because once I have what I like, I can make a template of it for my virtual machines. And when I create a Linux virtual machine, I don't start from an installer, I start from a template. So I basically have an installed machine that's ready to go. All I have to do is assign it an IP address and start installing software. Okay, an IP address and a host name, and then start installing software. But like I said, I could theoretically strip it down to beyond what it does. Also, as far as updates, I am kind of trusting the process. I may move away from that. Right now I'm using the installers within the process, but there are some notions of moving towards an update server that we are using for the Windows world. So there's going to be a different, a different place where we look at the updates, we say, okay, this gets approved, this gets approved, this gets approved, they get deployed, instead of just saying, you know, apt update and apt, dist upgrade. Dan?
Yeah, I was going to say, echoing what something you said, Brent, and then Steve followed on. In the Windows world, what you're talking about there is in the Linux world is done by using Ansible and Kubernetes. But what I don't understand in the Linux world is whether we have the ability to do what they do in the enterprise for Windows, which is a Windows update server. An enterprise takes updates from Microsoft and they review those before they parse them out to everybody. So why doesn't the Linux world use a Linux update server to do the same thing for us? And that would help us out. The other thing that, and maybe they do that, and I'm not aware of it, but the other thing I wanted to mention is if anybody's concerned about this recent malware injection, you can look to see what version of XZ utils that you have on your system. There's a command that lets you do that. Chris Skyard, who is a guy that is a member of our group, I'm going to have coffee with him here at the end of the month, a local coffee shop, and he's the one who posted that. I don't know if everybody saw it, but if you have version 5.6.0 or 5.6.1 of XZ utils, you are probably potentially susceptible. If you have anything else, you're not. Well, I checked mine, and I'm 5.4.1. I'm running MX Linux, which is based on stable Debian, and so I'm not going to get the latest and greatest 5.6. I'm going to get 5.4.1, which is what I have. So anyway, that's one thing you can do. Just do an XZ utils --v for capital V for version, or dash capital V or dash version, and check your version and see what you have, and that should help you out there too. That's all I got.
I wonder, just throwing 2 cents in there. My Android phone says these apps are slated for deep sleep. And I wonder, looking at the other end of it, where you're constantly updating things that you don't use, if something like that could be done with the Linux OS, where, say, if you haven't used something since you installed the OS, if that can just be put into some sort of a deep sleep and not be updated further.
Just deselect it. There's you can do that in your aptitude command to deselect a package, not to update it.
Yeah, but I want it all done for me and I
Yeah.
want it spoon-fed to me.
Gene,
That's just the kind of guy I am.
Gene,
Yes.
in the Linux world, at least with Debian, when you do an apt update and apt upgrade, is usually a listing with in my case, a considerable number of packages. It says these are no longer being used. Use sudo auto remove to get rid of them. So at least that part of it, where where apt sees it as no longer necessary because they've been superseded by other packages you've installed, it'll tell you that. It won't tell you if you haven't used, for example, LibreOffice Writer for 4 months. It won't say to you, you haven't used LibreOffice Writer for 4 months. Maybe you get rid of it and you'll, regain a lot of megabytes.
Well, mine, when I do that, the auto remove function, the message that comes up, it's never any more than old Linux kernels in my system. So that would be the only thing. And that's kind of meaningless when it comes to the problem that you guys are talking about.
Sorry.
No, I mean,
trying to help.
That's the kind of thing that I was pitching, but what you just said is that it doesn't do stuff that you haven't used for 4 months, and it doesn't do this and it doesn't do that. Make it do that.
There may be programs I want to use occasionally. I mean, maybe I'm going to use gparted.
Well, then you bring that
months.
in and update it. You update it to the current version or whatever.
Oh, well, if I can, I'm keeping them all updated as long as they look like they're not moving from no system D to system D versions. Yeah. Okay. And it looks like they're safe in terms of nothing pops up when I do the upgrade saying, simulate the upgrade. You do apt upgrade in the Debian world, and it doesn't do the upgrade. It just says this is what's going to happen. And then if it says, by the way, we're going to remove 16 packages, which happens, this is the package I could upgrade. And if I do that, it's going to remove my printing packages, cups, a bunch of cups. And I said, I don't know why it wants to do that. And I think I might not have printing after that. So I guess I won't upgrade that package. So it's sitting there until I understand that I don't need the other 9 packages, which I think I do need, or until a new version comes out, which doesn't tell me that the other ones are going to be removed automatically as part of that install. That put everybody to sleep.
Yeah. I was just typing back to Gene.
All right. Well, we can come back to this, but I want to make sure we get around the room. So, Steve, you got anything else going on this month?
Well, it's a long-term project. One of the things I understood about insecurity was that there's an exploit. A botnet was set up using edge router X routers by a Russian group, and the FBI broke it, and they actually reset the passwords and such for the victims and presumably notify them. They said most of the people with Edge Router X and routers who were victims had not changed the default username and password. So I know I changed it. So I haven't looked. The FBI, as far as I know, has neither modified my username and password or notified me. So I'm assuming that I'm not part of a Russian botnet. But if you get funny Russian messages after this meeting, then I apologize.
Steve, probably the NSA will probably get to you.
Well, yeah. Well, actually, there's a newer group, right? It's the CISA, which is getting good reviews, at least from Steve Gibson. I haven't, and so this was publicized by the the FBI, or by CISA directly.
Pharma.
They announced that they had broken the botnet and they had done this, that, and the other. So hopefully, if there's anybody else out there who's using an Edge Router X, you're not still a residual member of my. Leander's has a nice comment there.
Yeah, I saw that.
He thinks the Chinese guy is actually working for
I wouldn't
the
doubt
NSA.
it. I wouldn't doubt it at all.
Well, that would be great, but I hope it works in the Russian and the Chinese repositories, because that's my thought, that having your own national, distribution, it still requires that you have national repositories so that you keep your system clean while you destroy other people's systems. And of course, then the FBI or the NSA can go and attack those repositories by sending somebody in, presumably with a Russian or Chinese name, to work as a developer in the same way. And maybe they've done that.
Well, the Russians don't do that,
For
Steve.
me, the question is about a router. Yeah, of course not, Dan. For me, the question for a router is there's two ways of looking at it. Three. One is, imagine yourself as an enterprise and get the fanciest enterprise router and spend, if necessary, $4,000 or $5,000, and then you can do everything with it, and even hire somebody to make sure that anything you can't do, they can do. And as long as you have enough money and you're crazy, you could do that. And then the other two versions are to use a typical consumer advertised router, which gets good reviews from PC Mag or other such journals, basically on the basis that they have the right software, firmware, and performance. Or you can go the route of being a paranoid security nut who says consumer routers tend to be insecure. In some ways are based on their hardware, and in some ways based on their firmware and software, and lack of adequate update, or demanding that you have insecure setups in order to manage the router. So, yes, that's enough. Dan is going to suggest that. That's great. So as I posted, there are two routers. There's a site called routersecurity.org, which focuses on this problem, and they've recommended two routers that are not mainstream consumer routers. One from a company called, I think it's called PepLink, although they have a router called PepWave also, and the other from a company that produces a router called PCWRT, and the PC stands for parental control. And I'm just tossing in my mind which one I want to try. My current setup is so minimal, so primitive, so old, that almost anything I buy at this point would be ahead of it in speed, both on Wi-Fi and by Ethernet too. And we're not having great problems, so I don't need a massive performance improvement. I would just like to figure that maybe I'd get something that, because of the philosophy, would be satisfying to me from a security point of view, especially when people are muttering about all these new threats. And that's all I have this month. But if anybody has advice and wants to communicate with me, I'd love it. If they tell me about the problems they've had with their routers or the successes, that they've installed their own firmware, they've done their security updates, they're mavens about this, to use a Yiddish term, then I would love to get this somewhere via the email or however. And that's my month.
All right, thanks, Steve. I think Gene had something to say, and
yeah,
he can go ahead and
just
do his
kind of
thing.
circling back to the problem that they reported. My understanding of malware, and admittedly, my understanding is very flawed, but doesn't malware have to be executed by the user computer, or can it be activated like without any sort of okay, so that answers that question.
Yeah, let me just say that the magic word is remote. if you have malware that you install on a computer, but you have to be at the computer and physical access, that's considered much less of a threat. So the really bad ones are those, and this is one of them, that you can get at remotely.
But I do think it needs to be said that something has to initially kick off that software. It's got to be running in either itself or within something. It has to be activated. It can't, I mean, malware just sitting on a drive isn't particularly useful. But in the world of something where it's a library, it could be running in half a dozen different places because of various different pieces of software that use it, and you're not even aware of it.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, I
what-
think the library has to be running.
Yeah.
But if the library is so universally going to be running much of the time on many computers, then this thing can remotely access it without having to go no user or password. That's my understanding, that even if it's not intended, I guess if it's not facing the internet, then it can't get to you if you're not connected.
Well, yeah.
But we're talking about the internet connected things, because the guys who are living somewhere and have a computer without connection to the internet are probably very few.
Yeah, I mean, it's remotely executed is the thing about this deal. And it's also allows remote control once it's executed.
Yeah.
On the computer. Yeah.
Root level.
Right.
All right, Gene, what else did you have this month?
He's muted.
Gene is muted.
Yeah, I'm not handling the technology very well. Okay, there we
Pulling
are.
a Dan.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So just not much on Linux, but going through some pretty big life changes. I'm getting ready to vacate my house and place out here in Barnyardsville, as Dan calls it. And so I've contracted with an auction company to come in and auction my belongings. So anyway, I'm stripping down to the bare bones. And Ed, if you're listening, let me know about Rolling Green Estates if there's anything down there that looks good. So
What are you telling us, Gene?
I'm just saying that I'm got some big life changes coming. You know, we were talking about your big life changes, and
Yeah.
those are mine. So that's pretty much it.
All right, thanks, Gene. Santiago usually has to leave early, so let's talk to him before he's got to go.
Yeah. I haven't really done too much on my side of the Linux and stuff like that recently, because I've been going through some stuff, outside of the internet and stuff like that. I am thinking about starting a project with a NAS system, trying to make something with media. I forgot really what it was, but it was I'm gonna want to do something with a NAS system. We're getting a NAS and working on something with that. But yeah, other than from those other things, I've also been traveling quite a bit. I've been I just got back from California, so I was doing that for a little while. So I've just been, I guess, busy outside of the side of the internet and Linux on my Linux side. But I do want to start getting back into that. I actually have a course that I was working on at the time to help me prep up for something with CompTIA certification, because I want to see how that will go. But I haven't. But I like I said, I've been a little bit busy on that. But I want to start getting back into that as I've got more time now. But yeah, I guess that's basically all I have. I have really done the last, actually not for just the last month, but the last several months. I've just been busy and working on stuff outside of this. But yeah, I'm gonna start to work more on that, and yeah, I guess we'll see what happens from there. But yeah, that's basically all I have to say, I guess, for the time being. Yep.
All right, thanks, Dan.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on something that Santiago is working on that he didn't mention, and I hope he doesn't mind if I mention it. He and I have been talking, and Santiago's got an inroad to a very active YouTuber by the name of Jailer Croy. I don't know if much of you know about him, but he owns his own company called LearnLinuxTV.tv, and very active Linux professional. I mean, this guy's top notch. And Santiago is working on trying to get him to come in to give us a presentation. So I think that would be wonderful if we could do that and get that to happen.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
like
would
I
be
said,
awesome.
yeah, like I said, I will try doing my best what I can. I did make a draft of the email. I'll say, Dan, I just haven't
Okay.
put in that part yet, but I'll send you a draft of what I say in that part once I get
Okay.
once I write it in, which I'll start working on when I get a chance. Which hopefully will be today. I'll see
right.
I'll see what I can work on.
And Brent, so that you know, I was thinking along the lines of perhaps Jailer Croy could come in and do like a 1 hour presentation on Kubernetes or Ansible or something like that. I think that would be wonderful for me anyway. I don't know about the rest of you guys if you want to know anything about Kubernetes.
I certainly could stand to.
Yeah.
Thanks, Santi.
Yeah, you're welcome. No problem.
Alan, what do you got going on?
Just trying to work out various issues that crop up on a daily basis. For example, I use FileZilla, file transfer protocol, the secure version. I've got a SSH security keys, works fine. I've been using it for years. But I had a need to set up another FTP account for somebody that's working with me. And rather than installing SSH keys and all, what I did is I set up on FileZilla, they have different protocols. And when I can make the protocols work, the secure, what it does, it gives you the choice of using explicit FTP over TLS if available, or requiring explicit FTP, and it uses TLS, which is Transport Layer Security, used to be called SSL, and it's a set of security keys that basically encrypts that communication. And so when I set up this account for the person I'm working with, they go in and can successfully log in and connect to the FTP server. But the error that's occurring is it will not display the directory listings. So I get a message that it's successfully connected, and but it gets stuck and will not show the subdirectory, the files in there. Evidently, it's a pretty common problem with FileZilla, and the crux of the problem is, I think, that there are some ports that need to be open. Like it wants ports 889 and 900. So once it logs in, it uses the transport layer security encryption on those ports. And I've opened them up on our server. And no matter what I do, I cannot make that work. In order to facilitate connecting and proper operation, displaying the files, and I have to use use plain FTP, which is insecure. That works, but all the user credentials are all, and your data is displayed in the clear as it navigates across the internet. So that's one issue I'm dealing with. Anybody has any ideas? I welcome, any tips. The other question I have is regarding to cookies. When I am browsing the internet, and I'm seeing this much, much more frequently in the last year, and I think it's because of that European, requirements for privacy issues. I'm constantly getting requests to accept cookies or accept some cookies but not all cookies. And I'm not sure how that actually works in a browser, because when I accept a cookie, it's amazing. I am getting emails and other and web content that is directly associated with the that website that I had visited. So I don't know how that works. If any of you knows how that works, it'd be great to learn.
Alan, maybe tangential to what you're saying when you say works, because there's two separate things here. One is that you can reject, you can deny all on some sites. You can reject all but essential cookies. So that's one thing to minimize that. The other thing is what I understand again from Steve Gibson is that Google, and people here can correct me, Google is sponsoring an approach to non-identifying individuals and individually when you go to sites, and they're promoting that for at least their browser. And the idea there is that would tend to eliminate these I believe that it would tend to avoid targeting you. It's complicated, and I don't understand it. I don't understand it hardly at all, and I don't understand it enough certainly to make any sensible comment. If Dan is going to explain it, that's great. I see his hand is up. No, he's not. Okay.
Is that part of the incognito program from Google?
Yes, I believe so. Yes, thank you, Gene. And I don't understand that too well either, except that it's supposed to free one. It doesn't mean that you won't still end up in your browser with a whole bunch of files that are cache files from your browsing activity. But that's
I
not
just
what you're
do not understand the mechanism of how they remotely access your cookie files on your local computer, and then advertise that out to potential advertisers or other websites. It just boggles my mind how that would even work.
They're looking as hard at you as you are at them.
A consequence of the Google thing is apparently that websites now are saying you'll have to sign in, where before, you would just be browsing and click and you'd see something and they'd automatically get information on you through the cookie mechanisms.
Anyway, that's what I've been up to. That's about it.
Dan?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment on something that it's not about cookies, but I want to make a comment on something that Alan said. You made a comment, Alan, about SSL and TLS being the same. They're not. Transport layer security and socket secure SSL, secure sockets layer, they operate at different layers of the OSI model. I believe TLS operates at layer 4. I'm not quite sure what layer SSL works, but I think it's above layer 4, like layer 5 or 6. But there are different layers, but they're different protocols. They do similar things, but they're not synonymous. So make sure you understood that.
Okay. It was my understanding that Netscape developed the original SSL protocols.
Yeah.
But it's been mainly supplanted by TLS at this point.
Yeah, that's probably true. That's true.
Right. SSL v3, which is the final version of SSL, is deprecated on just about everything. You're not supposed to use it. In fact, TLS 1.0 and 1.1 shouldn't be used either. Everything should be TLS 1.2. And when people say commonly SSL, what they really mean is TLS.
Yeah. Okay.
Whether, I mean, they're not synonymous, but in practice, I mean, in common parlance, they're essentially the same thing. When people say SSL, they really mean TLS. When old fogies like me say SSL, I'm really meaning TLS.
Are you saying Alan's an old fogey?
The shoe fits. The orthopedic shoe fits.
You can tell the old fogies we have beards. White ones for the most part.
That's true.
Ed is rubbing his chin now.
There's another old fogey.
So
Good
Ed,
to
what's
see
going
you,
on?
Ed.
Other than your mute button.
Live streaming is on.
Oh, was that not on all that time?
Nope.
Yes, start over.
Oh, well, I was saying that my primary system died and I had to replace it. So I did a quick interim replacement, buying a system off of eBay from some company that refurbishes business systems. And it was a Dell Optiplex 704-row small form factor. It came pre-installed with Ubuntu. So I left that on there for a while just to try Ubuntu, because I haven't tried it in probably over a decade, to see how it's changed. And I played with it and I said it's interesting, but I don't want it. And then I overwrote that with Linux Mint, which is my preference, XFCE. I'm old school, so I like XFCE. So I have not made that my primary system yet, but I probably will. In the interim, I fixed my primary system. It was an SSD drive that died 3 months after I bought it. And so never again will I buy some off-brand. I'll always buy Samsung in the future. So I have got that back up and running again. And I'm probably going to switch to the small form factor, because it's pretty darn good. It's fast as greased lightning, and paid the whopping sum of $296 for it. So that's what I've been doing.
All right, thanks, Ed.
Let me make one comment to Ed. Ed, regarding your ABS project, I've been watching this series called Air Disasters on Smithsonian Television, and most of the episodes are also on YouTube, and it's fascinating. I mean, if you haven't seen them, I think you would enjoy, or at least get something out of watching some of the the causes of crash, and many of them involved avionics. So good luck.
What's that called? Air ambassadors?
Air disasters.
Oh, air disasters. Well, it is my intention that what I'm working on would not cause that.
No, it doesn't. The ABS is not the cause, but it certainly could prevent, some like TCAS and other, basically navigational electronic tracking.
Once my nephew's product goes commercial, I'll be able to disclose all and give you a link to everything. We're getting close. We're getting extremely close now. We're on like version 3 of the printed circuit boards, and everything is working. And now I'm having designed a new board, for a thermal board to protect one particular piece of his equipment that doesn't work well under 30 degrees, minus 30 centigrade, and under minus 40, it will self-destruct even if it's turned off. So he's got to have a thermal system to keep it warm enough. And I've got to detect when it's too cold and turn on the heater and monitor that. So I'm working on his thermal board now, which has to fit into a tiny, tiny little space. And So I'm having to learn totally different processor to work on that. It's the microchips AT Tiny 1616 is what I'm using. And in fact, I just got that processor working, loading a simple app in it. Just getting the tool chain working was quite a challenge in face of poor documentation. Not my cousin, not my nephews, but microchips.
Hey, Ed, I just wanted to say that you probably don't want to give that thermal board to NASA unless you want to give it to them for the Parker probe. It might be the only thing that might work. But I wanted to just do a shout out to you and say I applaud you for going to XFCE. I use MX Linux and I use the XFCE desktop environment, and I really like it. It's really nice.
Well, I've been using XFCE for a very long time, and I just wanted to. I've tried other things. I just don't like them. I like XFCE because it's designed to do one thing, which is to use my tools effectively and efficiently, and it doesn't waste a lot of my time with eye candy.
Exactly.
All right, I'm going to turn off my picture. I have to hold it so close to my face it looks like I'm staring into the. I'm using my phone.
We know.
we got the message.
All right, thanks, Ed. Larry, what do you got going on this month?
Yeah, Alicia should be here possibly soon.
Not having my Linux seems to be working well. I mean, I don't usually leave it on, but maybe one computer all the time, and I'm connected to the internet all the time. This laptop I just boot up just before I'm using it, like for this meeting, and so everything. I don't have a lot of cookies and all kinds of stuff like that. It just boots up sort of basics, and maybe that's why everything works for me. I'm not browsing around downloading all the crap that you get from a browser. But one comment, Gene said something about the moderator for this meeting, and I noticed that if I try to connect to this meeting like 5 minutes before 12 sometimes, or a little earlier, nobody else or anybody else is connected, it says you get a message that the moderator is not connected. And to log in, if you want to be a moderator or something like that, and I just wait till. So somebody must be the moderator here, according to Jitsi. I don't know if it's Gene or Brent or whoever, but it's not me as far as I know, and I didn't really want to be the moderator either.
I think it's one of those things where if you look around, Larry, and nobody else is doing it, then it's you.
That's exactly right. They've changed their program. Jitsi has.
Okay, well, that's it for me for right now. I might make some more comments later.
All right, thanks, Larry. As far as moderator, when I join, I don't do anything special, but I do use the app. So I don't know. I mean, and as far as I know, like everybody has the same capabilities to like mute everybody else, and I mean, I assume they do. I don't know. I'm only ever capable of me. So as far as I know, it's a completely democratic system, but I have been using solely the app as of late.
Yeah, the way it works, Brent, is if when you come up and join, it'll say that there is no current moderator. Do you want to wait for a moderator? And if you say no, I want to go ahead and join, you become the moderator. That's the way it works.
So I assume somebody is impatient enough that they become the moderator.
They become the moderator. That's right.
Oh. All right. Thank you for that. Arnold will be quiet as always, but he did say hey and says he's using Mint and has cast some aspersions on those not doing so. That's an extreme statement. I'm sorry. Leander, what you got going on?
It's month's been pretty busy. At work and stuff as usual. And I've been sick twice. I had COVID, and then I've had the norovirus that's been running around the last week. So still haven't completely recovered from that. But before I got sick the second time, I did go out and got I got my astronomy gear back together and used an open source program called Cyril to make a decent shot just of the M42, trying to get back in practice with that. I have been last Friday was interesting when the XZ thing. I was on in a chat room with some Debian maintainers trying to take that apart and figure it out. And yeah, I don't know what all has been said and not said. It's just it's definitely sophisticated. It's the interesting thing is it was keyed, and in order to get a proof of concept together, you had to replace the private key in it with one of your own, so you could see what it did. So it's sophisticated, and it looks like they had intentions of protecting it, so to sell it, which makes me think state actor or private contractor like the NSO group, that they're the ones who developed the Pegasus malware. But it really doesn't fit. It's somebody with some sophistication. So China, the U.S., or Israel probably. They're usually the big ones in that. Russia and North Korea, they tend to stick to off-the-shelf stuff they can buy off of the darknet these days. They don't tend to do sophisticated things like this. So I don't know. That's kind of my thoughts on it. Another interesting thing is I think it only triggers on RPM and Deb-based distros. So like even Arch with Systemd it wouldn't trigger on. So it was very specifically targeted towards enterprise-facing stuff. But this is why SID and Rawhide, I would say, are not production, and things based on SID and Rawhide are not production safe, and I wouldn't use them. It didn't make it into stable. It didn't make it into enterprise Linux. Yeah, so that's my kind of 3 cents on that. It's interesting. I don't think that closed source stuff is still somehow safer. You can social engineer your way into Microsoft. Get somebody into a lot of get a dev into a lot of gambling debt, bribe someone. So people with these kind of resources really doesn't really affect them closed versus open source too much. But yeah, I would. What else did I say up here about that? I was typing away. It is as for like the checking of patches and stuff. I do run a local app mirror, but that's more to save bandwidth on Debian to be a good citizen than it is to actually do any checking. I mean, I'm pretty far deep in this stuff, and I feel like I don't have the technical capabilities to sit there and verify every single patch and code that comes down. So, yeah, I think at some point you just kind of have to trust some of that stuff. Um, the question somebody had about the telling you how much you use an app and to remove it, that would probably require more telemetry infrastructure than most Linux distros are comfortable with putting forward outside of maybe Ubuntu and Red Hat, because they're going to have to track that usage somewhere and tell you if you've used it. So that's probably why you're not going to see that. And Microsoft and Android, obviously, they want that data, so they're going to track it for you. Kubernetes, yeah, I did do a Kubernetes setting for work. From an engineering standpoint, that is a Silicon Valley solution if I have ever seen one. I am not, from an engineering standpoint, I am not that impressed with it. There's a reason why no one hosts their own Kubernetes cluster, hardly, because the back end of it is a lot of moving parts. So I'm impressed that it works at all, but there's definitely a reason why everyone buys Kubernetes hosting from Google or Amazon or Microsoft. Um, and again, my maxim there is only fools are impressed with complexity. So, but it definitely smells of a tech bro solution to things. The cookie stuff, yeah. But yeah, that's kind of what was I was an early adopter of Ansible. I had a coworker who was a big puppet puppet person. Went and did the puppet training and everything. I actually adopted Ansible like 2013, 2014 because my main take from it was agentless. I don't know if I would bother learning it these days because it's kind of on the way out. The new thing is NIX packages and kind of stateless, reproducible things. So Ansible, I think, is kind of heading on the way out. You're about 10 years too late. It's still in places in a lot of enterprise. I still use it, but I'm looking more towards reproducible pure cattle on every. I mean, Ansible, I kind of have pure cattle going, but with Nix OS and Nix packages, you can really go pure cattle. You don't change the operating system once it's deployed. You just rebuild it. It's completely reproducible and redeploy a new image. So seems a bit wasteful, but it also means the thing can be read only. You don't have to do a lot of. You don't have to. It's just more future proof. I would still learn it. I do know it. I learned it from Jeff Geerling's book I bought about 10 years ago. I learned quite a bit from that. I've also learned quite a bit from just screwing around with it. At the end of the day, though, it all comes. I still probably make more use of shell scripts than I probably should these days. But yeah, I mainly liked Ansible because it was agentless. Puppet and Chef and all of those, you had to have an agent. I had a mix of hardware and OSs. I took over a bunch of BSD machines. There wasn't a Puppet agent for those. We had a bunch of switches that you could SSH into and do things over that, but you couldn't install an agent on. And so Ansible kind of became a one-stop shop for, hey, if it's got an SSH client on it, or an SSH server running on it, I can do things with it and automate it to an extent. But yeah, I think that's kind of it. I've really been impressed with Cyril and the output from that and the astrophotography stuff. I guess on the XZ thing, outside of not running close to the bleeding edge, this is where getting obsessed with chasing new and shiny kind of bites you in the butt, right? Like, I mean, my Debian may be out of date, but by God, if there was a lot of people have looked at it in the 5 years. So I kind of feel it's a bit more robust in that regard. The other side of that is at the end of the day, somebody with these kind of resources to pay someone for 2 or 3 years to sit there and work on a project, there ain't much you're going to be able to do to stop it. It's a lot of, at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff I talk about with protecting your privacy and security is performative. If the feds kick in your door and you wipe your hard drive, you're going to jail for data destruction, evidence destruction. They're going to get you. Like, I mean, it's just like, I mean, at the end of the day, whoever wants to get you wants to get you. And a lot of this stuff I do, I realize is a bit performative, but yeah, it's somebody with these kind of pockets, whoever did this thing, it was, like I said, it was either a security research firm like NSO Group or somebody trying to build in a backdoor to sell to a government, or it was a government. Just from looking at it, this wasn't some 400-pound guy sitting in his basement bored. So anyway,
all right, Leander.
So
leave us 400-pound guys alone.
So, well, the 400-pound hacker name is 4chan, but it wasn't that guy. This was yeah, they usually don't have the patience and don't have the foresight to lock it down with a key like that. So this was somebody looking to use it or sell it to be used. And that's really, to me, people focus on the government agencies. And, you know, if you could look up the history, there have been several times when the NSA has been caught red-handed trying to backdoor open source projects. And
Oh yeah.
everybody remembers the Clipper chip in the 90s and stuff too. But we need to watch private sector stuff just as much. There's a lot of money. You know, it's just like when Edward Snowden said you blew the lid open on the PRISM project. Well, they shut that program down, and now they just buy your data from Facebook, or which isn't against the Constitution. It's
Sure.
they said they can't unlawful search and seizure. They didn't say they couldn't go buy it from somebody you willingly gave it to. Private industry, I think, deserves more scrutiny because there are tons of, I will say, mercenary style security researchers out there that are in it not to protect you, but for the money. And like I said, the NSO group, I mean, they sold Pegasus to Saudi. That was one of the things that got Jamal Khashoggi. Khashoggi, I may not pronounce this, but the journalist who was critical of the Saudi regime, who got hacked to pieces and taken out in trash bags.
Yep.
That was what was used on his phone. They sold it to him. They've sold it to our government and police. So the private, a lot of people are like, big government, I'm scared of big government. And I understand that. And I'm right there with you. But the private sector, I think, needs just as much scrutiny because they're completely profit motivated. And yeah, this kind of reeks of a private contractor, if you ask me, to a degree. So anyway, that's my rant. I'm kind of done. You can look at my pretty picture if you want. And yeah, anyway.
Leander, question.
Yep.
Are you gearing up to take pictures of the eclipse, or?
No, I hadn't made any concrete plans. I went to the eclipse in 2017 as part of the physics department here. I was adjuncting at the time. My side gig was I was an adjunct physics astronomy professor, and we went down there for that. And I spent 9 hours getting back from Silva to Boone, which is normally a 2.5, 3 hour drive.
I was in that traffic.
Yeah, and considering I spent this week where I couldn't get more than 50 feet from a toilet, I kind of don't want to, in case I'm not quite over this stomach bug that's going around, I kind of don't want to end up 18 hours in traffic from Ohio. And it looks like it's going to be cloudy up that direction anyway. So,
well, that's too bad because you got two things going for you for this eclipse, unlike the one you mentioned earlier. And that is you got a 4 4-minute window to view it. And the second one is it's at the peak of the solar activity. So you're going to have an extremely good corona.
We have the observatory up here. We're in like 90-some% or 80-some% totality.
80%,
they're setting up a hydrogen alpha scope to look at the sun. Of course, you can't order hydrogen alpha scopes anywhere anymore. They've been out of stock for 12 months or more, back ordered. So
Steve could probably get you one.
Yeah. But I would love to go back. I would love to go back and see totality, but I mean, this is probably going to be a train wreck of traffic, and I didn't have the foresight to find a place and get it booked up and everything this time. So last time the department kind of took care of it. We were just like, we're sending y'all to see the eclipse, and I think this time they're not doing that. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like this one's been hyped a lot more than the last one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you doing anything with Self, Leander?
With what?
Southeast Linux?
I submitted 3 talks. I haven't heard back. I'll go regardless, but I haven't heard if they've been accepted or not. Actually, I could probably check to see. But they said they were supposed to let us know this month what our talks were going to be, but let's see. Editor, view your proposals. Nope, it still says in review. So,
wow, that's crazy.
They were not very well organized last year, I will say. So I wonder if they're having more of those same issues. Excuse me.
If they won't take you as a speaker, they do.
I went there I spoke there in 2022. I missed the window for 2023 just because of work stuff. But I don't know. We'll see. I submitted 3. One is my usual talk on Darktable, and they've got new features. I submitted one on doing a live portrait shoot and editing with Darktable. I figure it would be good to get people hands-on things. So it could be like a laboratory workshop kind of thing. And then I did a thing about things that tick me off in Linux evangelism called "You Use Linux, Nobody Cares." Like things that tick me off about my thought is don't tell people about the tool, go build something with the tool and show them the result.
Yeah, there you
That's what
go.
impresses the people.
Right.
Like nobody cares if you bought a fancy paintbrush, people care that you painted the Sistine Chapel with
Exactly.
it, kind of thing. So anyway, that's rant over. So for now. But yeah, that's kind of my thing. I hope, yeah, if you haven't seen Totality on Eclipse, I very recommend it. It's a very almost life-changing experience. I don't know, that's probably a bit much, but it's very kind of, it's one of those things that is just, it's crazy.
Well, if you
I,
haven't seen the Great American Solar Eclipse 2024 NOVA PBS presentation documentary film, it's about an hour long. You should watch that too. It's great.
I guess actually I've got, hang on a second, Pictars
I've got it
iOS.
archived to my NAS now, and it's I'm going to rewatch it. It's really wonderful. A lot of historical information and stuff.
Yeah, there we go. So this was the setup I took to the one of the setups I took to the last eclipse.
Nice.
With there's some other guys. We took a bunch of. This is my precision I had at the time. We had these bench of Dell Precisions here running the stream for the physics department. That's the old head of the department, Dr. Calamai. I think he wasn't the head of the department at that time. I think that was Briley. But yeah, there was a whole crowd of people there. These are the little projection of the eclipse through the leaves. Some general pictures of people looking up. There's some stuff through the scopes. That's just with my phone, I think. That's in the wrong folder. That was someone starting a fire with a mirror. It was more tech work. There we go. So those are the shots I got actually during, right after Totality, or right about then. Anyway. So
Yep.
that's kind of, that was a quick tour of my slides there.
Yep. It's nice.
So, but yeah, clouds broke at just the right moment. So that's the thing with these things, is you're gambling with cloud cover, and I think there's supposed to be a pretty good chance of it up in the Ohio Valley. I was thinking about going to Leander, Texas, is actually in the path of Totality, and I
You
thought
bought a
about
city in Texas, huh?
yeah, so I thought about going to Leander, Texas, visiting some friends in Austin, but I didn't get that far either. So,
well, what about those devices, Leander, that you can put on your telescope that blocks the sun? Forget what it's called.
yeah, I've got it's not within reach, but I've got a bunch of those here because I've got
Oh, do
several.
you?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's actually something I bought in the last month. Is
Forget
another
what they're
telescope.
called. There's a name for it.
But yeah, there's solar filters. You can get them made out of.
Well, it's an
Mylar?
extension it sits away from the telescope. It blocks. It's a disc that blocks the sun.
An occultation disc.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, you can get. I'm not. Those don't do well in our atmosphere. That's what they use on like the space-based telescopes, because you don't have the atmosphere scattering the light. That's how SOHO gets the corona pictures all the time.
Okay.
Yeah. But with our atmosphere, I mean, even if you block the disk, you're still going to have the blue light scattered everywhere.
Oh, okay.
But that's why an eclipse works well, because the moon's outside our atmosphere. So
right.
that Rayleigh scattering is what gets you. So anyway.
Question for Leander. I understood that there was, from the New York Times, that there was or would be a NOVA for a while. It comes back every 88 years.
Yep.
Are you planning to photograph it?
I hope so. It should be this summer sometime, I think, or somewhere in. a 6-month span. But yeah, I'll probably try to photograph it. I've got, let's see, I've got a couple of different tracking mounts. I don't have any pictures here with me, but I've got a couple of different. I've got a Skywatcher little. Actually, I do have a picture of that here. Window.
Which
So,
constellation is the Nova coming out of?
I think it's in. Gosh, I'd have to look that up. It's to the north. It's not Ursa Minor though. But it'll be like the direction to the north. Nova. Let's see. Oh yes, Corona Borealis. Yeah, the Northern Crown. Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
Corona
Okay.
Borealis. So I think it's going to be kind of this part of the sky. That doesn't really help you because you don't know what direction. But this is one of my tracking setups here. This is just a Nikon camera with a 70 to 200 lens. That's why I took that picture with. But this is a little Skywatcher. It actually runs off of AA batteries. So I just stick some rechargeable batteries in it, polar align it, and go. I've got a bigger equatorial mount that I also use for like larger scopes. That was in that picture of my C8 and stuff. That's a big. This is the C8 here. That's the big. I've got a big Dobsonian, but I take that out for visual stuff for clubs and outreach at the observatory. And I've got a couple of refractors here and stuff too. And I've got these. If you, I've got some. I don't know where they are, but if you have a set of binoculars, you can you can order the material. Too late now, but I've got a sheet of it. But then you can actually cut the mylar out and put it on the end caps here and make yourself a pair of magnifying solar V just out of a cheapy set of. Well, these aren't that cheap, but you can get go in grandma's basement or given the age of anyone here, your own attic and find an old pair of binoculars and make a solar viewer out of it. So yeah.
I want to make a quick comment before we close. From the Nova film, the documentary film that I watched, I thought was really remarkable. Historically, the first time that man was able to determine that solar eclipses were cyclical, can't speak today, was 2,000 years ago, which I thought was interesting. Babylonian astronomers discovered that. And to give you an idea of how far we've come in technology, Babylonian astronomers were able to tell that solar eclipses occur all over the earth, but they weren't able to tell where they occur. But they were able to predict a solar eclipse within 4 hours of its occurrence. We have now been able to track the totality path of a solar eclipse anywhere on the earth within a band of, I think, 100 feet of the actual 100% totality of the path to 1/10 of a second of its occurrence, which I think is remarkable. That's just phenomenal as far as our technology has come.
Astronomy is the oldest science, unlike the oldest profession, I guess. But but it was important. Early agricultural societies
Exactly.
needed a time keep, know when to. I don't know if I would say I'm writing a book yet, but I'm doing research in that direction on some Japanese original sources, because during the Meiji period, they threw out a lot of their kind of local astronomy lore and stuff and adopted the Western side. The Meiji, they just basically threw out, in a modernization process, threw out a lot of their traditional stuff and adopted Western practices in an attempt to catch up to the rest of the world, or as they saw it, to catch up to the rest of the world. And a lot of their old lore and stuff around astronomy kind of went with that, and old discoveries and stuff like that. So I found some original sources written pre-World War II about that, but they're in Japanese, and so I'm kind of using my skill there. I found a more modern book written by a Japanese anthropology professor, but it's clearly written by someone with English as a second language and focuses exclusively on folklore. It's a good text, but I kind of want to do some more with bringing that to Western audiences, because I have an physics with an astronomy concentration undergrad, and our astronomical history was all Western. It was all Europe and that kind of stuff, and people all over the world had two eyeballs, just like Europeans did, and I figure they probably noticed patterns or discovered things and wrote it down too. Just a matter if they kept track of it.
Yep.
So,
well, I have an undergraduate degree in mathematics with a secondary degree in physics undergraduate. So,
yeah, I've got my master's was in physics and engineering, and I need to dust off some math. I haven't done anything more complicated than algebra, and I've been kind of following your teasers, your brain teasers there over the week. But I generally just don't check personal email that much over the week because I am absolutely blasted at work. Although I'm starting to take the UNC job didn't work out. Probably shouldn't have talked about hentai during the interview anyway, but
probably not a good idea.
no, I'm kidding. The interview went really well. I thought if I was a good fit. They said, hey, you're a good fit, but my guess is they had an internal candidate. Just, they sent me an email saying, hey, if you want input on helping with research computing at App State, we're more than happy. You were such a great, so it seemed to be friendly. It wasn't like the get out of here, idiot type kind of rejection. So, hopefully at least open some networking doors for me there. But I remember where I was going with that, but work has just been crazy. And ever since then, I've been kind of like, a lot of this, we run essentially web applications and stuff for a mid-level state university. If something goes down, the worst that happens, it's not like Brent where people might die. No pressure because you're a hospital. But, yeah, it's, no one's going to die. No one's going to lose a foot. The worst that happens is people get a day off. They have to go outside, go get a cup of coffee if something goes down and they can't do their work for a few hours. So I'm kind of like pushing back on my boss's kind of like everything's an emergency attitude and being like, is it really? Is it really? This can wait till tomorrow. It's fine. So, and trying to have a little bit more sanity in my work balance. So, no pressure, Brent.
Hey, with robust downtime procedures, no one should die. Maybe maybe like the doctors will be working with somewhat less data than they had before, or whatever. Yeah. But they, we have procedures for working without anything at least computer technological. So,
Brent, at least it won't be, if they die in the hospital, it sure won't be because of your department, right?
They were dying anyway.
Well, listen, I have to say that sometimes you want to get the records, and if the records all of a sudden are not available, you may have a bit of concern about what to do with the patient.
That's a good sign.
Well, I mean, once upon a time, you were in that pickle anyway, right? You pretty much had to rely on word of mouth, or I mean, technology is relatively new. Medicine is not. So,
Brent, we haven't heard from you yet.
Yeah, sorry, I talk a lot.
I'll be brief. I mentioned a freezing issue I was having last time that plagues me often in this meeting. I may have improved upon it, but I have not made it entirely go away, but I have hints. So I looked at my BIOS settings and realized that I had the option to dictate the amount of RAM I gave because it's an integrated graphics controller, because it's a relatively low-end machine. So I was allowing it to automatically allocate the RAM. So I'm like, well, maybe I will just give it all the RAM I can, because I have a lot of RAM on this system, so why not? So I set it to the highest number, whatever that was. And I think maybe it's better because it has only happened once since, in the last month. And it was just like yesterday. I thought I was that I had licked it, but then yesterday it froze up on me in the typical way where I'm in a video looking at video content of some variety, either, you know, something that's displaying video. And usually it's like I have to actively be mousing as well for it to freeze. At least that's my experience. And then but I wonder if like it's been made better. So I wonder if maybe it's a bad stick of RAM or something. So I'm going to go back and scan my RAM and see if anything comes up. But that has improved somewhat, maybe. As far as routers, I should say we talk about an enterprise environment and high-end routers and firewalls and so forth. I mean, I don't know how high-end we are, but I've always been that guy. I used to be the router guy, but now I'm still the firewall guy. My opinion on home stuff and what I do is I use what my provider gave me. And I would not, even though I think I know things, I would not use a custom built thing for protecting my network. I'm far more likely to make a dumb mistake that goes unnoticed than, say, Linksys or whoever would. And I I I would be also hesitant to go with some really niche security router provider as opposed to like a higher end like Linksys, Netgear, whatever the main TP-Link, whatever the players are out there. I would rather go with one of their higher end products than some second tier that has gotten some security accolades because it's the many eyes thing. If there's something going on in a Linksys router that there's a million of, it's going to get out there. People are going to know about it, and it'll probably be you'll get a fix for it before you're going to get a fix for the thing that it could be broken and no one's going to know about because only dozens, hundreds of people use it. So it's kind of the no one got fired for buying IBM approach, which is the older I get, the fewer people understand that reference because it's like IBM, they're like a services company, right? But yeah, that's the approach I take is just stay within standard. Don't be afraid to spend a little extra money, but keep it to what most people are doing with as acceptable recommendation. Don't go too crazy in any given direction. XFCE. Someone, Ed was lauding XFCE. I've always been a fan. I installed Debian XFCE on my laptop after trying to run Debian LXDE, which was not particularly featureful and caused me some issues. XFCE is a little bit better, but one thing and I've not spent any real time on fixing it, but like I took it out to dinner because I was on call, and then I realized that I couldn't connect to a network with the tools that were built in. I couldn't just say, look for networks. I had to look at the network on my phone to see what the name of the network was and then add the network. And I don't know if it's something that for whatever reason doesn't come stock that I need to install, but you would expect that's fairly core functionality out of the box. I don't know why it's not present on my system. Like I said, I've not spent any time trying to fix it, but it doesn't let me just look for wireless networks in the GUI. When I supplied the open network name, I connected fine. It worked like a charm, but it was just very strange that it did not I'm fine with it not offering connectivity to me randomly when I'm not even looking for it, like so many things do. But if I do want to go looking for it, I'd kind of like it just to find it for me and give me a list and pick off the list than have to type in a name that may or may not be, complex, and I need another device to actually find it. So that was weird. But all other than that, I do really enjoy the lightweightness of XFCE Debian on this older XPS laptop I have. Norovirus. I understand that's on the Appalachian Trail right now. That's what I've heard recently about it.
It's ripping through ASU up here. About every restaurant has been closing early because their staff's all got it. It's everywhere up here. I don't know, who knows where I've got it from. Usually it clears up in 1 to 3 days, but I'm on day 5 now and it's still kind of lingering. But
you have gut challenges in general, though, right?
yeah, I've got some like IBS issues, so I think that's kind of stacking things. So yeah.
Mm.
Steve? Muted,
man.
Yes. Who's?
You rose your hand.
Okay.
Raised your hand.
Well, I'm sorry. I thought that was before about the Nova, but let me mention about the router. One thing when we talk about router hardware is that it exists because it's electrically cheaper to run than a full computer. I know Dan had mentioned, well, just use an old computer that you're not using to do that. Or the Linux router. You can make a router out of a lot of different hardware devices, and the idea is that the simple ones that don't use a lot of electricity are just basically cheaper. To the extent, I'm not an expert, but I understand that they tend to run either ARM or another hardware type of processor, which has some, typically the consumer ones have vulnerabilities because of that design. But that's why you see routers being sold. I believe that most of them use less electricity, even the fancy ones that are $300 use less electricity than running a computer 24/7.
That's my issue now. I pulled an old Dell Optiplex out of surplus to put pfSense on years ago, and it's been solid, but it's even with everything turned off in the BIOS, it pulls 30 watts sitting there. So I'm actually looking at replacing it. I remember last year I bought that little N100 mini PC, and that's been working great. And they make versions of that now with 2 or 3 NICs in them. And I'm looking at that. That thing sits at sub 10 watts. I mean, it can run off of a phone charger, and it's a regular Intel chip, so any x86 64 router distribution will work on it. My only problem with Brent's approach is Linksys and Netgear and Ubiquiti and whoever else is out there tends to drop support for their older hardware.
Yeah.
And if I sink a couple $100 into a router and then in 2 years they're like, we don't support that model anymore, it kind of ticks me off a little bit. And
is that really a concern in the use, the user space though? Like I don't think I have ever contacted.
Means you're probably not getting security patches for it anymore.
Yeah,
that's an issue.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the need for security, but like the attack surface on my router is essentially non-existent, right? Like it doesn't. Okay, it doesn't exist.
Which the NSA does.
Like there are no open. I mean, I'm just saying, assuming that I got it and it was secure.
Yeah.
There are no open ports other than from the inside, and it's just a password protected website for configuration and so forth. Obviously, if something is coming from my machine to it, then theoretically it could be attacked. But that's going to require a little bit more coordination than most things have. Wireless wise, I mean, I'm in on the boonies, so even if it were poorly situated in some way, wireless, it's just, my deer aren't that smart, they don't know how to do those things, so unless you're intentionally driving up my driveway to get within range of my wireless signal. Like, and I realize not everyone is in that scenario, but even so, local attacks not common.
Yeah,
So it's such a tiny attack surface. But if I were running a PC as a router, and especially if I was trying to do fancy stuff, do port forwarding with, I just suggest don't port forward unless you really, really need to. Run a cloud server. You know, there's a lot better ways of doing things these days than allowing people into your network. There's not much to hit. Even if you never update the thing, even if you're terribly lax about that sort of thing, you're probably going to be fine. But if you run a piece, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. I mean, just a few months ago, the FBI shut down some botnet that had compromised a number of older Linksys routers. I mean, you never know. I mean, you're right. There's a low attack surface, but if somebody's got a bug out there for that specific model, that specific firmware, and a lot of those also depend on the default configuration. You know, if you don't change your password or default stuff too. So it's a risk either way. I mean, I use the OpenSense for a couple of reasons. One, hardware support. Two, like I do a number of VPN things. And Brent's right. It's probably not a good reason to. I don't even like if I stream or do something. I use that through like a Molvad. I know somebody who's got it in a thing. I just kind of want to see how it works. But yeah, but that'll be on a completely separate part of my on a separate network and everything. But it's yeah, so you're right about that. But it's like I said, just for me, it's kind of the commodity hardware. They tend to move out of support so fast, and it's if you're like me, I mean, I upgrade every other Wi-Fi generation basically. So it's I tend to keep them years and years and years, and so that makes me a little bit more worried about the security side of it. But if you're a typical consumer who like throws it out, every couple of years, it's probably not a bad path to go. It's yeah, they are built. Steve has got a point. They are built to a price. They are built to, they're also usually sized barely bigger than what the connection is they can handle. That was originally what got me building my own routers in the mid thousands. Was my roommate and I upgraded to the 10 megabit charter connection, and the little crappy store routers couldn't handle it. They didn't have enough CPU and RAM, and so we ended up building our own just to handle that connection.
Do some fun security things to basically make them just work very, very slowly. Franklin in 2017, I went to Franklin for the Total Eclipse, and my notion is there is no substitute for totality. It really is it's almost there, and it's like, yeah, it's kind of like all the same thing, but the totality, it's just a completely different experience. And I'm glad to have experienced that once in my life. That being said, I'm not spending money or fighting traffic this year to do it again. But my daughter, who was not able to see it in 2017, is going to Santa Claus, Indiana, to experience it. So
you're right about that. 2017 was a pretty good experience. We had like 98%, I think it was here, and
yeah, I mean, I didn't have to go far for totality. But that being said, I did have to fight a lot of traffic on the way back. Because it's one thing getting there super early. We spent the day there, but we were pretty much done when it was done. But so was everyone else. So, yeah.
What I liked about the 2017 one here, where I live, is not only did
but the routers are out. If we're talking about a Wi-Fi access point and router, then the antenna technology, MIMO antennas, they get broader coverage in your house, and they are also advertising now Wi-Fi 6, which is an updated Wi-Fi protocol. And the main issue I have, I buy routers like once a year, and I bought a fairly inexpensive Netgear router, and I applied the firmware update from Netgear, and it disabled remote administration, which really ticked me off because I like to be able to remotely do port forwarding, and it no longer allows that. So you got to physically be at the router to add port forwards and other administrative tasks. Anyway, that's my comment.
Steve?
Briefly, that in fact, Alan, that is supposed to be a safety feature, the elimination. But of course, every safety thing may have a pain in the ass element to it.
Yeah.
Well, there is a way around it. I mean, I could flash the router with WRT, DDWRT, and which I use and like, but it upsets me that they, in the goal of security, they've really eliminated a very useful function, which is remote administration.
Yep. True.
All right. Any last words from anyone before we go?
Just this. I understood that while 6 is the latest, 6E and 7 are coming soon, and some people have said, really, if you're going to buy a router because it's a 6, wait a little bit to get either the 6E or the 7. So I don't know if this is the continual improvement problem where you end up never buying something.
Save a lot of money that way.
Yeah, I think Steve, on your question, I think the difference in the store router and the router OS on a computer is just like a lot of Linksys and stuff. They use BSD or Linux. They aren't reinventing the wheel. They're just using that and slapping a GUI on it usually.
Well, I was thinking that the advantage of a router designed OS would be that you minimize a lot of attack surface.
Yeah, I mean,
you don't need on a computer that you're not going to use.
They've made some
really hard on BusyBox.
Yeah, they've made some good. They hopefully have made some good configuration choices. But yeah, that's mainly the difference is just configuration and presentation, really. So yeah, that's yeah. Hopefully, initial. Now, like I said, some of the store-bought routers, especially way back when, they made some pretty poor security choices, and yeah. So, but that's certainly changing a lot now, though. So,
yep.
And Microtech is one of those ones where it's a router OS, but you can hang yourself with it. You can yeah. You can definitely they come pretty unconfigured out of the box, and unless you know what you're doing with networking, you can really expose everything. So.
All right. Anything else? Any ideas for next month? Requests?
I haven't thought of anything.
All right. Well, let's discuss it in the normal channels.
Yeah. All right. See you guys later.
See y'all next time.
Good.
All right.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye bye.